Well, good afternoon, all of you. Here I see that participants are still joining, so we will wait a few more minutes to make sure that everyone arrives that wanted to come. And then we will start. Paul, I don't know, but I think we can start, and whoever comes later, they can join. So welcome everyone, and good afternoon to you all who joined to us today to this training. And as you could already read, today we would like to provide a little training and support for those that just started to work with the Erasmus Plus or works as an international officer at the university and started to familiarize themselves with EWP. So here you can see already our plan for today. It's going to be an intensive 2 hours in front of us, and we will frequently ask for your feedback. So you really are going to be actively participating here and be engaged. So our plan for today is basically 4 main blocks. The first is going to be an introduction with some interesting facts, contextualizing EWP, and a historical overview of how EWP was born. As well as in the block 2, we are going to reflect on the questions that you already raised to us in the registration form. In the third block, there's going to be a quiz where we are going to basically lay down a general workflow of the Erasmus project management together throughout the questions. And then in the end, you will have the chance to ask questions live. I myself is called Anikó, and I'm working at the European University Foundation as one of the activity leaders for the EDSSI project. The EDSSI stands for European Digital Student Service Infrastructure, and you could hear a lot and read a lot on the website about this project already. And under this program, we were maintaining and further enhancing the Erasmus Without Paper network. And that is why we are now providing with this training for you to catch up a little bit about the network development. And here, let me introduce you the other panelist, Paul Leys. So Paul, if you want to introduce yourself in a few sentences, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Anikó, and also good afternoon from my part to all the participants. So indeed, Paul is my name, and I work at Ghent University and the International Relations Office. I've been involved in the EDSSI project where I led an activity on support and help desk infrastructure, but I'm also already quite a few years involved in everything that has to do with Erasmus Without Paper. I think the first meeting took place in Ghent, and that was about 9 years ago. So I hope to share some of the experience I have in this initiative with all participants in the training today.
Thank you, Paul. And let's roll what I would say. So let's see about the first block, about the introduction. First of all, I'd like you to familiarize a little bit with the Slido. So either on your phone or on your browser, please open slido.com and enter the code. You can read here, EDSSI Training EWP. Actually, I'm just going to do it with you, so I'm sure that you see what I want you to see. So I'm entering the code EDSSI Training EWP. And then I should go to I should see the Q&A at this moment because I haven't started to showing you the first question that I want to show to you. So I hope that you are with me, because now I'm going to ask you the first question on the Slido, which is an easy one. I'd like you to share with us what you like the most about being an international officer or Erasmus coordinator, hopefully the position that you are actually now working in. So please take a look at your Slido, and you should see the question, and then you can enter a word which describes what you like the most about being an international officer. And it's anonymous, so we won't see what you are writing. So we are waiting for you. Hope you are with us. And then you have to hit send. Oh, okay. So travel is so far the largest one. You all like that this is intercultural. Okay, that you can meet people, that there are many challenges. Okay, we like those as well. You can contact with a lot of people, travel new places, the international intercultural perspective, the diversity, feeling young. Yeah, I vote for that as well. Dynamic, and also building Europe. Okay, beautiful. Many answers. I leave you still to add keywords because we are going to save it and then we can recycle it. Okay, I shut the door. And I see that many of you already answered our first question. So we are going to roll to the next one, which is asking you about the materials that we sent you before. And we are curious about your honest feedback, whether you managed to consult and read all of the materials or part of it. So let's see. How is it going? I see that many of you did not have the time. It's fine, of course. We will partially oversee the materials that we have sent you, but we'll still recommend to save it for yourself and check it by time to time when you have a question. Yeah, it's a busy time of the year. I agree, Thomas. Okay, I see that. So if I read the chart correctly, about half of the participants actually managed to go through partially, like watch a few videos or part of the videos, and actually the 9% who watched and read everything I mean, that is excellent. So congratulations on that one. So now we are going to roll already to the next session. This was basically just a warm-up. To a short introduction about the Erasmus Plus program itself and some interesting fact. So if I understand correctly, most of you just started to work in this position or work here less than a year. Since I was also working at a university as an international officer, Erasmus coordinator, institutional Erasmus coordinator for 12 years, I also can understand that in the beginning, sometimes you don't see the entire framework that is around you. So I wanted to provide you with a short summary of how to look at the Erasmus program, what are the key numbers on European level, and where you can find useful information when you are looking for it. So first of all, just to scope down and make sure, now we are talking about the individual exchange programs in higher education, because Erasmus Plus is also for youth, for volunteering service and everything. So now in this project and in this session, we are only working about the individual K Action 1 exchange programs for higher education institutions. So I'm sure you've heard and looked a lot about the statistics and the main information about the Erasmus Plus program, that this is already 35 years old, that in this year it has a 3.9 billion budget. This is not for just higher education, this is for the entire program, that this is the flagship program of the European Union. Indeed, this is one of the most successful one, and it was started in 1987 with the aim actually to support peacekeeping between the nations of Europe, to make sure, and this was the hypothesis, that students that are traveling in this very sensitive time between the age of 18 and 30, and they meet people from other nations and they have some intercultural sensitivity skills, well, they will less voting for starting wars between nations. And what kind of opportunities does this offer for you? It offers for study periods abroad, for traineeships, for apprenticeships, and staff exchanges. Also, it offers other types of cooperational projects, and not just on the field of education, but on the training, on youth, and also on sport. Which is interesting for us is the European Universities Initiative, and now the newest initiative, the European Strategy for Universities. And since I'm going to share with you the slides, you will see all the links where I found this information. And later on, because these sites are updated in many cases, you will be also able to go back and check the general information about the program for yourself. What I wanted to show to you on this slide is from 1987 to 2020, how many learners and staff participated in the Erasmus program, and you can see that it is almost 12 million. So it's a huge number. It affects really the intercultural changes in Europe, and makes sure that the university students or any participant that participates in the program will enable a much more intercultural lens in their future life, hopefully. The other small chart that I brought to you already focuses on higher education. So here you can see how many institutions obtained Erasmus Charter. So on the chart, you can see that it is 4,314 higher education institutions that obtained Erasmus Charter between 2014 and 2020, and 453,000 prospective participants receives the grants from these projects. A little bit focusing more to study mobility. So I took a look at the statistics between 2014 and 2019. And I wanted to provide you with a picture of approximately how many students participates in Erasmus in Europe. So you can see that it's slightly increasing until 2019, and actually in 2020 it will basically halve because of the pandemic. But until, you can see that it's like an increasing number every year, about 280, 290, 300,000 students that are traveling across Europe to take part in the Erasmus Mobility Program. And Spain is the one that sends and receives most of the students. Then comes Germany and France. More female than male. Approximately 60 to 40% of the students. So it's absolutely more female than male students. And I also summarize it to you. So altogether between 2014 and 2019, approximately 1.6 million students traveled to Erasmus Mobility. Erasmus is not only for students, though we mainly only work with them at this moment, but it's also for teachers and academics. I'm sure you are all aware of that. And I here collected to you a little statistics about that as well. So you can see that it's approximately 300,000 teaching mobilities between 2014 and 2019. So if you go back and compare it with the 1.6 million, altogether it's almost 2 million mobilities, but the teaching mobility is a much smaller amount of mobility between this period. The gender balance is actually changes there, interestingly. So it's less female and more male. Interesting what's happened between. Polish teachers are the most active, and Spain, not surprisingly, is the most popular destination of these mobilities. Here I collected a few challenges that you might agree and also face every day during your work. One of the new challenges is the blended component. I think that we have to deal with, and this will require a lot of investigation and a lot of sharing good practices between each other to bring the best out of this opportunity. The other important aspect, I think, is the inclusivity. So to ensure inclusivity in this program, I think, is one of the largest and biggest challenge. Digitalization and change management that we are going to discuss mainly today. Relations with internationalization. So Erasmus program is one of the main pillars of internationalization, but of course it does not cover all of the aspects of that. And between all of this and being super busy, I think the most important to consider as a challenge as an international officer or Erasmus coordinator is to not to lose the focus that this is basically a life-changing experience for the students and staff, and this is where we are waking up every morning, and this is what we are contributing for. And I think it's a nice and good mission I can really live with. Where to find the interesting and useful statistics, data, and information if you need. I collected here you a few links, the Erasmus country fact sheets or the mobility statistics data annual report. So whenever you are, like preparing a policy paper for your university or trying to convince the leadership about something, these are, statistics that can prove your point and help you to put your university into the context of Erasmus and higher education. So now I'd like you to focus back a little bit to the Slido and join a quiz. So now I'm going to ask you a question that I was talking about during the last 5 minutes. And you will have, thank you for joining. And you will have approximately 20 seconds to answer this question. So I see you are ready. I'm waiting a little bit more, so everybody is there. Excellent. Very good. Still joining. You are with me. I really like this. Okay, I think it's stopped now, so I will launch the question. So approximately how many teaching and study mobility have been realized between 2014, 2019 in Erasmus? If you remember the pink numbers I showed you, so 10 to 50,000, 500,000, 1 million, 2 million. Oh, excellent. Very, very good. So the correct answer was between 1 and 2 million. And let's see our leaderboard. So Johannes was actually answering it in 10 seconds. Excellent. I wasn't even reading the question in 10 seconds, I think. So that's congratulations. And now we can roll on for the next part, which is also me. And then, of course, we will change for Paul. So the next one, what we wanted to show you a little bit of contextualizing EWP, to put EWP into the bigger picture a little bit, which is actually EDSSI. So here you see this super complex architecture diagram, which took us approximately 1.5 years to put together. So of course, if you do not get it for the first time, it is absolutely normal. And I think for the better, actually. So what we want to show you here is where is EWP and what is the main role of EWP in this entire environment that we are working in. So let me take apart a little bit this EDSSI architecture. If you took at the left side, this is the authentication, so-called authentication and authorization, but I will translate it to you to a very simple term. Basically, when we are in the digital world, we cannot be sure who is who. And this is the same in Erasmus administration. So if you want to have the students to fill out application forms with their Google email address, what they can, call however they want, this is not the most secure way to do it. So what we worked on in the My Academic ID project and now with the EDSSI project is to make sure that we can identify who is who, and then what can they do in these different tools like the online learning agreement. Because when a student enters the online learning agreement, they can only sign it as a student. They cannot sign it as a sending institution, correct? So this is when we identify who is when they log into, for example, the online learning agreement. And then we make sure that they can only sign it as a student and they cannot sign it, for example, as a sending institution. And to be able to identify that students, that's why we launched the ESI, the European Student Identifier, that some of you had questions about already in the registration form. So here is my feedback. So this ESI basically makes sure that the student who is using the online learning agreement or the Erasmus app is that student from that university. That's what ESI says. So it's like John Smith from XYZ University, and whichever tool that is also using ESI will be able to identify the student out of doubt. This is the role of this. If there are still questions, we can talk about that later. The other half of this EDSSI, so this was the entrance, right? So how are we entering to the different tools? The other half of the architecture shows to you what kind of services or tools we are using to manage Erasmus Plus mobility, right? How are we communicating? What is the interface with the student or with the staff? With the student, one of the interfaces is the online learning agreement. With the staff, one of the interfaces are the dashboards, but many of you also uses their own software or any commercial software to manage the Erasmus program. So in this part, we made sure during the EDSSI project that we also enhance and make compatible these services within each other and with the Erasmus Without Paper network. And here comes where we arrive to the focus, to the interoperability. So EWP basically connects the dots between the different tools, between the different stakeholders, and make sure that there is quality, generalized quality in the network and in the management of the Erasmus program on European level in a digital format. But Paul will talk much more about this. So I am rolling on and will ask, hopefully, not more questions, but giving the floor to Paul.
Thank you, Anikó. And in order to discuss a little bit more about Erasmus Without Paper and what exactly are the aims of such ambitious process, and maybe the dreams we have with Erasmus Without Paper, knowing that we might not realize this dream nowadays, but towards the end of the current program, for example. Then it's good to stress that, and it's a hypothesis, but that all bureaucratic processes can be automated, and the many paperwork that international relations offices have to do on a daily basis, and our colleague Thomas was referring to, it's a busy period this month of the year. But I think many of you can testify that it's never quiet in the international office. It's always a lot of work to be done. And that's why we try to make the lives of the IROs easier, although that might sound a little bit strange with the issues you're facing with dealing with EWP nowadays. But the aim is to make our lives easier and to let the IT systems do a lot of our paperwork, and instead of having to deal with a lot of papers and stamps. And then, of course, there's time for other stuff. You can go to the beach and relax, but probably you can invest more time in the real support for students who want to embark on an exchange, or on things that at the moment are a little bit lacking behind, because you have so much time and energy needed in order to focus on the whole administrative efforts. And you can go to the next slide, Anikó. So if we look at a more global perspective, we really live in a digital society, and we need to be aware that in higher education and universities, we might not be that digital yet as in other sectors. And of course, with the pandemic, I think a lot of steps have been taken towards a more digital ecosystem. But this is an ongoing process. And what Erasmus Without Paper is really focusing on is trying to digitize the Erasmus administration. Like I said, instead of working with stamps and signatures and paper forms for students as well, who are, I would say, digital natives. They are born with a smartphone in their hand, but then they need something like a printer. They might never seen one, but then they go in Erasmus and they need to print all this material and copy and run around for stamps and signatures. So that's what Erasmus Without Paper is trying to do something about. Next slide, please. This is how it looks like Erasmus Without Paper. Of course, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but you know where I'm coming from. And then when we look into Erasmus Without Paper, next slide, the main goal is to support electronic exchanges of student data. And we want to achieve this by interlinking existing databases where systems can talk to each other and exchange information about mobility students, exchange information about interinstitutional agreements, about learning agreements, nominations, confirmation of stay, arrival, transcript of records, and so forth and so on. So that's the idea, that universities, higher education institutions can keep using the tools that they have available to manage their mobilities, but that we connect those tools in order to have a fully digital process. And there we go. It would also allow automatic migration of data, for example, reporting towards the new beneficiary module. It's not the case yet, but with this principle of focusing on machine-readable data that can be exchanged between systems, that's of course the aim we have with such initiative. And what we would like to do is to move away from the paper world and really go towards a more electronic world. And you can, I think, easily see it. For example, when you have to do payments, more and more you can pay by card or by phone or by apps. instead of needing coins and banknotes. Now, and on this picture, what you see here is that there's two universities, higher education institution, they are communicating with each other, and the protocol, that's how they communicate, that's EWP. So EWP does not interfere with how you are organized or how you manage everything internally. But what EWP does is it's a communication protocol that those two universities need in order to connect to each other. So the idea is that systems exist. In a paper world, you use your system in order to create an agreement, but then in the end of this process, you create a PDF or a real copy and send it via PDF or via airmail to your partner university. In EWP terms, the idea is systems are connected and they exchange digital information. And as you know, digital information, it exists out of 0 and 1, but a lot of them, and then those systems can communicate. And it's very important to understand, for example, a PDF. You might say, yeah, that's digital as well, but the problem is that PDF is not machine readable. When you receive a PDF, it's not that easy to also integrate it in your system. So a PDF, in a way, it's a document, it's a paper, but in an electronic format. And Erasmus Without Paper, this is really a change of paradigm, where instead of documents, data is flowing. We exchange information in machine readable formats. Of course, some of the cornerstones there is that we gain efficiencies, but also quality and compliance with the program rules will become better. And also very important is that what we aim to do is connect partners across Europe. That's the first focus, but also towards the future, given that in the new Erasmus program also international mobility, as it's called, is introduced. So mobility with not program countries, as they are named. That's the countries that participate in Erasmus, where higher education institutions have an EDSSI charter, but also with non-program countries, the whole world basically, where you can exchange students. That in the future this should also be supported by digital processes and an online administrative workflow. What processes are we talking about? It's really a 360-degree approach, where we go from information about the institution. Of course, that's the very first and basic thing you need to know. What's the name of the university, the Erasmus code, maybe other identifiers that have been introduced the last couple of years. Information about courses is of course also critical, because when you send your student, for example, to Ghent University, you want to know what courses do we have on offer for your students in order to find a good match for a particular student. The interinstitutional agreements, I can imagine many of you are already aware about what's going on with the interinstitutional agreements, and I will come back to that a little bit later. But also the nominations of outgoing and incoming students are on the radar, the learning agreement, transcript of records. I refer to the confirmation of arrival and departure. It's not a process as such, but the exchange of information would allow to also reduce the paperwork when it comes to those processes. When we look at the infrastructure, because I stressed before that EWP is about connecting systems, so that is part of the equation is the EWP network, where systems are connected to each other via what we call APIs, application programming interfaces. And an API is basically a set of rules to translate the information that is stored in your database to the protocol of the network. Then it's sent via the network to the other partner, and the other partner also implements the API in order to translate the information received via the network towards the own database. And in doing so, you have a common language. So you need to translate your own data model towards this common data model, but then you can exchange via the network between the two nodes. Of course, when we started this initiative, it became clear from the very start that not all universities already had a system to be connected. And therefore, we also worked on the EWP dashboard as a free cloud solution for universities and higher education institutions, not having such IT system, being it provided by a third-party provider. So you have the real mobility software, there's different packages on the market, or you have your own system in-house developed that you can connect. But those universities, it's oftenly universities with small mobility numbers that didn't have a system to connect to EWP. In order to also have them on board, it was very important to also offer a tool, and that's the EWP dashboard that I can imagine many of you are also using who are participating in the training, at least from the questions you sent beforehand and on the Slido. I can see that there are EWP dashboard users in this setting. So once again, looking back at what Anikó explained, this is about EWP and interoperability infrastructure, where there's a central registry service, but the registry, it's like a phone book where systems can find how to reach the other system. And what we will zoom into, it's the 3 use cases. So you either connect via the EWP dashboard, which is the free cloud solution. You might have commercial software, or you might have in-house software to manage mobilities. And via EWP, we connect those systems where you can point to point, one system to another system, exchange information on all the processes that were mentioned before. In order to give you a little bit of an idea on where we are today, so currently there's 2,454 higher education institutions connected. The large share of universities use the EWP dashboard, and the same for learning agreements. So IIA, maybe for beginners, we need to fully write it out, because this is, I think, one of the difficulties when you start working in international relations, is all those abbreviations. So IIA is an interinstitutional agreement, LA is a learning agreement, and their higher education institutions, HAYS. So for learning agreements, the connection rate is a little bit less, but also here, the EWP dashboard is mostly representing the higher education institutions. And to give you an idea, for the 2021 call, Student Mobility for Studies, which is one of the actions that, for example, you need an interinstitutional agreement and you need to use a learning agreement. There's about 2,800 charter holders who applied for this action. So I think the coverage is almost complete, I would say, in terms of higher education institutions connected to EWP. Now let's look a little bit to the Erasmus Plus digitization timeline, and also a lot of questions about this element, both in the preparatory questions and also the most popular question at the moment in Slido. So here, this is the timeline provided by the European Commission. So in this year, 2022, universities should be connected for interinstitutional agreements and learning agreements for studies. Moving on towards 2023 on the roadmap is transcript of records, application and nomination. To be honest, I cannot tell a lot more about these deadlines. The only thing I can tell, and that's related to the first question in the Slido poll, whether the current roadmap has been changed. It is still there, it is still the same, and the European Commission really stresses that it's about your efforts in order to engage with the digitization, When it comes to monitoring from the national agencies, the EDSSI monitoring guidelines, they will be published. I think that it should be at any moment. So there you can also have an indication on how strict will they be in terms of should all interinstitutional agreements signed via EWP or all learning agreements and so forth and so on. Now let's first zoom into the different processes that are on the digitization radar, and we start with the IIA, the interinstitutional agreement. Now, what exactly is an interinstitutional agreement? That's the legal underpinning for student mobility for studies. So student mobility for studies is one of the actions that you can support or that you can roll out under the Erasmus Plus program. It's also the case for the short-term blended mobilities and staff mobility for teaching. So whenever you want to exchange a student or a staff member under those actions, student mobility for studies, including short-term blended, or staff mobility for teaching, from the program perspective, it's needed that there is an interinstitutional agreement. This interinstitutional agreement is bilaterally negotiated between both parties, and it consists at first about general information about each institution, information that can be updated along the way without the need for approval by the counterpart, for example, about visa, about housing, application, nomination deadlines. All this kind of information is part of the agreement. And then you also have the terms of the agreement, where you should agree with your partner. We want to send so many students under this field of study for a number of academic years. So that is basically the agreement, and there's a template provided by the European Commission, which is more for informative purposes, because this is the information that we need to exchange in a digital manner. But at least you can recognize, or you can see the type of information that's also traveling via EWP once you start exchanging agreements with your partner. My recommendation would be to beforehand get in contact with your partner and agree on everything that is part of the agreement. Now, when I started working in the International Relations Office, it's about 10 years ago, one of my first tasks was to work on the interinstitutional agreements that needed to be renewed for the former program. And then my very first question was like, how do I define an interinstitutional agreement? Is faculty part of it, country, partner? Is it one ISCET? Is it several ISCET codes? And internally, we defined an agreement as a combination faculty, university, and ISCET code. But for other universities, for example, one agreement comprises all fields of education. For others, it's only one field of education. And that's also one of the things that we're experiencing right now when exchanging the agreements in a digital format. That's about the agreement in general. Now, what exactly can we do with Erasmus Without Paper when it comes to those agreements? So Erasmus Without Paper facilitates easy updates of the fact sheet information. I'm not sure if you are familiar with fact sheets. I am, and I think it's still a common practice that that higher education institutions, partners, are exchanging fact sheets. But of course, this is paper. You need to kind of find a way on how to share it with students. With EWP, this is very easy because you don't need to exchange fact sheets. You just can easily exchange fact sheet information, and also updates are on the go shared with the partner universities. It's also the confirmation of data points from negotiations that took place elsewhere. For example, and I think it's very important to understand that EWP functionality at the moment does not really support the whole negotiation process. You could do it via EWP, but it's not very effective. And then I go to the other column. It's not meant to replace an email negotiation process where you and your partner are sending an email like, okay, we want to exchange 2 students in this field, or we want to renew the existing agreement. So this conversation should take place elsewhere via the common means you have available. But then at the end of this process, one of the partners enters the agreement in his or her system and sends it via EWP. And then it might be very interesting to see how the negotiation process is translated in a system. For example, when you have an agreement and you said like, yeah, we want to renew the existing agreement. Once you start exchanging it, it might look completely different than you thought that the agreement from before was. And that has to do with humans needing to translate emails towards systems and not with system-to-system communication. So in that regard, it's very important that at the end of this negotiation process, you can confirm the data points via the EWP infrastructure. It also replaces signatures on PDF or on paper copies of agreements by EWP approval, so digital approval processes. And very important, this provides the legal basis for mobility. Issues that existed before with the paper agreements, they will probably exist still with EWP, because it doesn't solve all the issues we had before. For example, one university wants to have a university-wide agreement, another university wants to have an ISCET-specific agreement. This kind of issues you still need to solve and agree between yourselves. Also, when it comes to ISCET, how to interpret ISCET. Is this ISCET for students that for the subject they take at the host university, or is it their background at the home university? This is not defined by the program. It offers a certain level of flexibility. From the other hand, it also offers a certain level of complexity. So this kind of issues exist before. EWP does not solve them. Now, look what happens you can go 2 slides back, Anikó. No, one more. Yeah, no, one further. No, the other way. Yes, yeah, that one. So in June 2021, one year ago, European Commission announced like, okay, we are ready to exchange interinstitutional agreements. Let's try to settle your agreement via EWP. If it doesn't work out, you can also use an email confirmation for the legal base for mobilities in the upcoming academic year. So the one that is just coming in a few months' time. Of course, we need to have an agreement before we can announce to our students this and that, or the possible student study destinations. So that's why you need to have the agreement a lot of months before the actual mobility takes place. And in June, basically what happened was many colleagues were trying to use EWP. It didn't went very well. And then thousands of emails, maybe 100,000, maybe millions of emails, if you look at it as a whole, were sent back and forth in order to secure the mobility spots for the upcoming academic year 2022-23. This really caused a lot of discomfort, a lot of frustration amongst IROs, because they really needed to have the basis for their mobilities in the upcoming academic year, and the combination of a lot of emails combined with not working network nodes really caused some chaos in the IRO. Now let's see what approach they take between June and today. Some of them think, let's sit and wait. It's not working yet. We wait until everything works, and then we will start renewing our agreements. Other IROs got their hands dirty. They focused on, okay, some of the nodes already work. We can exchange agreements with particular users from a given system. So let's first focus on them in order to make sure that as many agreements get signed as soon as possible. And then in the end, let's hope that we can also exchange with other systems. So those two approaches, I think, were very clearly seen at the level of the IRO. In our case, Ghent University, I'm not only working in Erasmus Without Paper, but I'm also responsible in my university for the whole implementation of EWP. We definitely are in the second group of universities who are focusing on what works, who try to get as many agreements signed as possible before the next round, because that's coming up again. The next round of applications is on the radar. And to give you an idea, in Ghent University, we have about 1,000 interinstitutional agreements. And at the moment, we are a little bit above 25% of them being signed. So just to give you an idea on how big this exercise is, because it costs a lot of effort, especially because you have the negotiation process via email, then you start exchanging, and then small tweaks are needed. And so this costs a lot of time. So my advice would be not to wait with trying to establish those agreements, and continue working with what already works, and leave those nodes that might not be working a little bit aside. And then there's a question for you about how you would rate the importance of an interinstitutional agreement in the Erasmus Plus mobility management. It goes from not important at all until very, very important. So please. That's interesting. Maybe the colleague who indicated one, it's least important, is only supporting traineeship students, because of course it's not mandatory to be used. You can use it, but it's not mandatory, especially if you send traineeships towards the non-higher education sector. You do not need an agreement, but for the others, and I think most of the colleagues voting, they rate it as rather important towards very important, because, like explained in the beginning, it's the legal basis for mobility. When you receive an audit from the national agency and you send students for student mobility for studies, they will definitely check whether was there an agreement, can you show the agreement, was it signed by both partners, and all this kind of stuff. So my vote would go towards 8 or 9 as well, because it's the very start of what you need to do when you want to exchange student mobility for study students. So thank you for voting. Then we have the learning agreement, and it might not be the most logical process, but we follow the process or the logic from the digitization timeline. Maybe first I should have introduced the nominations, but what is a learning agreement? A learning agreement is also extremely important because it guarantees the recognition at the sending institution. It's a document that needs to be approved by student sending higher education institution and receiving higher education institution, consisting out of some administrative data about the student and the institutions, the courses taken at the receiving higher education institution, and also the courses that will be replaced upon the student coming back to the home university, the sending institution, where those courses taken at the receiving high should count towards the home degree, and so other courses are replaced. Once approved, that's the before mobility part, changes are possible, and I'm saying possible, but in practice we see that probably more than 80% of all learning agreements get changed, because beforehand you do all the prep work, but then the student arrives at the host university, and there maybe a course is already full, or this timetable conflicts. So in this process, this is still taken into account. So it's possible to still change the learning agreement on the go once the student arrives. With EWP, I think we did introduce a clear process for the learning agreement. There were a lot of discussions with higher education institutions, with European Commission, but in the end, this is how the process works. First, it's up to the student and the sending institution to kind of create the learning agreement. So basically, it's a student who is in the driver's seat of this process. You can consult the course catalogs from the receiving, discussing content with the coordinator, and then when this is done, sign the learning agreement. Then it's up to the sending higher education institution to approve or reject. When they reject, they ask the student change this and this and that. Goes back to the student, goes back to the sending high. And when the sending higher education institution approves the learning agreement, then it goes to the receiving higher education institution, who also has two options: approve or reject. When rejected, it's back to step 1 or step 2, depends a little bit on the implementation. But here it's very clear that the initiative is with the student and the sending higher education institution, and it needs to be confirmed to be approved by the receiving higher education institution. And when we look at EWP, so this process was introduced by EWP, which means that it is not possible to initiate the learning agreement at the receiving higher education institution. Like I showed before, the first step is student and sending institution. It's also not possible to add comments when approving a learning agreement. Extensive discussions on this point, but in the end, that was the decision. So it's only possible to comment when you refuse the learning agreement, when you reject the learning agreement, but not when you approve a learning agreement. It's also not listing courses available at the receiving institution. That's also something for the future. What it does cater for, sorry, one step back, please, is you can share the first version of the learning agreement approved by the student and the sending higher education institution. Receiving high can comment in combination with a rejection, or can approve. And once it's approved, you can still make changes and share updated versions that should also be approved by the 3 parties. And then, of course, it's very important as a basis for recognition. That's also supported by EWP. It's connected to the Erasmus app as well, but we would go a little bit too far to also zoom into that. Now, many higher education institutions, and you can go to the next slide, Anikó, are using OLA, as I shown before, which is the online learning agreement. It's connected to the EWP dashboard. If the partner is connected, all goes well, but sometimes the partner is not yet connected via EWP, and then the process cannot be continued in a digital manner. And that's the point that students will contact their coordinators because the partner is not ready to exchange via EWP. Of course, this is a temporary situation because, as mentioned before, by 2022, the end of 2022, all higher education institutions participating in student mobility for studies should be connected via EWP for such processes. And now you can put the process in the correct order for the learning agreements. So first step, second step, third step, fourth. So as steps, we have the students initiates the learning agreement, the sending higher education institution rejects, the receiving higher education institution rejects, approves, student signs, a layered sending. And let's see whether you paid attention to this process. I'm not sure how to interpret what I see on the screen, but
I'm coming in, Paul. I'm coming
okay,
in, Paul.
thank you.
Saving you. So of course you did very well. So you have to drag the answers into the correct order, and you are doing well. So first, of course, the student will initiate the learning agreement and then sign the learning agreement at the sending higher education institution, and then the sending institution either rejects or approves it. and then it arrives to the receiving institution, who either rejects or approves the learning agreement. So this was just a little exercise to refresh for you what is the general process of a learning agreement in a very general use case. Of course, it simplifies a little bit, but it simplifies also for you to a little bit show it to you that this is not that complicated. Of course, when we are going into the details, there are several back and forth and this kind of stuff, but in general, and there are cases when it's like that. Student just creates the learning agreement, signs it, sends it to the sending institution, they sign it, send it to the receiving institution, they sign it, and then that's done. And to compare it to the work that we had to do, like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, when we were exchanging these in PDF documents via email, to see the online learning agreement now working for the dashboard or any other solutions that are also working on this field, it is a little bit more refreshing to me, to be completely honest. So thank you for your work, and you did a great job once again. And if Paul, if you agree, I will take actually over the next two parts. So a little bit, we wanted to walk you through also on the nomination and the transcript of record, and I will be very brief here, so being cautious of the time as well. So we wanted to discuss with you a little bit about the nomination, which is, I think, one of the weirdest concepts you meet when you are entering to the Erasmus coordination and Erasmus coordinators world. And so what is it exactly, right? So you selected your students who you want to send to mobility. And you also have these interinstitutional agreements that are clarifying that I can send the 2 students to Humboldt University in this year to study chemistry there, right? So how do I inform my partner about my choice? This is nomination. This is the way how you inform your partner. Who are you planning to send for the next semester to study there under the interinstitutional agreement you already signed? So interinstitutional agreement plays a key role here in clarifying the number, the subject field, the dates, and the services that are provided to the students during the mobility or before the mobility. And in the IIA section, Paul was already introducing this to you. So I was a little bit polling the colleagues around and also remembering my time when I was working as an Erasmus coordinator. And I tried to list some of the ways that I remember how nominations are going now. So either I am emailing an email to the partner with the information of the students in the email, right? Or I am emailing, I'm sending an email where I am attaching a PDF, an Excel, a Word template that I previously received from the partner 2 years ago, or a template Excel that I received from them, or whatever I'm attaching. Or there is a tool that the partner is using, so I have to be aware of that and I have to know that, and I have to use that tool and send the nomination over there. Or actually, if I'm a good friend with that particular coordinator, I happen to have sent also indications of nominations via WhatsApp or even Messenger, or even I can have a call and ask if it is okay if I'm sending these students to you for the next semester. Or actually, I have no idea what was the request of the partner, and I have like 900 students to nominate in this semester. I have for like 1 month to do that, and I'm super confused. So if you see the system now, this is far from optimal, right? And to really map all of these processes and to somehow unify and generalize this, it's like super challenging. But if you scroll back a little bit to the slide of Paul, where he was talking about EWP and that we need data that is transferable to 0 or 1, so yes or no, it's really, really challenging. And so under the EDSSI project, we have been drafting a little bit these use cases and these opportunities. And there is an API that is basically ready, but being tested. to be able to use it with the EWP network. So that's the case about nominations in EWP. And what we want to do with nominations is to be able to clarify this process and make it automatic and straightforward, right? And that the nomination requirements are on institutional level, so different faculties and departments will not vary with the requests. But what will not really be possible is indeed the case where requirements are coming from faculty or school or department level, or institution-specific processes. So there has to be a kind of general protocol to be able to do it effectively. So then you don't have to struggle with all of the different processes that you have to struggle now. So get ready for the quiz that I prepared for you about nomination. So let me see if you are with me. Still. Let's see how many people did we lose. Okay. So, between which steps in the mobility flow you will find nomination? Arrival and then receiving the transcript of records, or applying for Erasmus scholarship and win Erasmus scholarship, or I just won the Erasmus scholarship and I departure for the host institutions. Let's see who managed to join. Oh, excellent, excellent. And let's see, yes. So you just won the Erasmus scholarship and you are before the departure to the host institution, correct? That's where you do the nomination. Oh, and we did not see the leaderboard. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes, this was the correct one. And a few words about the transcript of records. So when we were preparing for this training, I actually shared a short story about my Erasmus with Paul. And when I went to Erasmus, I was studying music. And I clearly remember that I had choir singing at the host university. And I also had the same subject, choir singing, at the sending institution. So I applied for the choir singing. I did choir singing at the host university during the entire semester. And I came back and basically faced with the situation that my teacher told me that they will not recognize the choir singing subject. I have to learn all of the songs that they were singing during the previous semester, and I have to take an extra exam from that subject, which was truly shocking for me, because I didn't understand that I was singing in a choir particular songs, of course, at the host university. Why is that not recognizable, music being one of the universal subjects in the world, right? So I remember my true shock on this, and I had to, of course, learn the other songs, and I had to take the exam during the spring semester, giving me an extra workload during the spring semester. So this story I'm telling you about the transcript of records because actually with a careful preparation with the learning agreement, where we already clarify with the teacher that he or she is going to recognize that choir singing subject for me, this is the key for a successful Erasmus program. Otherwise, you are basically just duplicating the study work for your studies. So what is exactly the transcript of record is basically containing all of the credits that you achieved during the mobility, a student achieved during the mobility, the grades that you have been awarded, and of course the components. So for example, choir singing that you were taking at the host university. And then it should basically be a supporting document which will support transferring those credits. So in this example, the choir singing into the sending institutions system and then being recognized and not repeated. So the R is for recognition and not to repeating the exam. Also, these documents should include the grade distribution info to convert grades, because in Europe, of course, there are different grading systems. So it should always contain the information about convert grades. What does the transcript of records in EWP will cater for? It will make sure that this is easy sharing between the institutions, and it will also share the grade distribution information, but it will not cater for sharing this with the students. So since this is an official document, this will still be shared via the official study system of the university. And of course, it cannot cater for the recognition at the sending higher education institution, since that is a complex procedure specific for each higher education institutions. So here comes my question. Which document correlates the most with transcript of records? And now you have to start with the most relevant and go to the least relevant. Yes, exactly. So let's see the votings. Yes. So I think the result is already showing the right prioritization. So of course, if you did not clarify clearly the subjects you took at the host institution in the learning agreement, it will be very difficult to create a proper transcript of record. But actually, criteria can already be set in the application. Nomination plays, in my opinion, the least, but maybe Paul will argue with this. Interinstitutional agreement plays an important role with the transcript of records, because you can set some rules for recognition already in the interinstitutional agreement. So all of your partners are aware what are the criteria for you to be able to recognize the subjects that your students are taking at their university. Thank you very much for the great, yeah, Paul, go ahead.
The grade conversion information is also part of this interinstitutional agreement. So in that regard, it seems more important than voted here. But I think it's quite tricky to understand those nuanced answers. But it's very good to see learning agreement is on top, and it's even part of the templates from the commission. It's the transcript of records part. So that's clearly the correct answer.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why. So what we do here is we are asking the questions, but also asking the questions so you are aware of that little nuance of the procedure. So we don't have to just tell it to you, because learning by doing is always a bit more effective in our opinion. So thank you very much for contributing once again, and you are doing, I think you are doing really great with the answers. It was so far, the majority was always taking the best answers, and there are no wrong answers here as well, to be honest. So let's see the second block, because Paul was checking and reading over all of your questions in the registration, me too, actually, and he clustered the majority of the questions, and now he's going to provide you with some feedback about those.
Yes, and I hope I clustered it rightly so, but I think about 10 of the colleagues asked questions about the SQ roadmap, the EWP roadmap, the deadlines, and it's also quite popular in the current Q&A on Slido. Once again, I can stress that from the European Commission perspective, they said, like, by the end of 2022, we all need to be connected via EWP for learning agreements and interinstitutional agreements. So each interinstitutional agreement that you know have via email should result, especially those where you have mobility, of course, and that's my top tip. First, focus on those agreements that you have active for mobilities. So those need to be signed towards the end of the year in a digital manner. I think there's still a lot of confusion when it comes to learning agreements, whether or not, for example, for a first semester student, when you have the learning agreement on PDF, should you redo it in a digital manner once the systems are connected? I don't have a clear-cut answer there because I'm not the policymaker at the European Commission. I have an approach at Ghent University that I can share, but I'm not sure if that's the official approach, and we might need to review some of the stuff later. But we focus on when a learning agreement is established, which is a complex process, we keep it as is. So if we have a PDF signed learning agreement, we just keep it on PDF. And if you need to review it in the end, okay, we will redo it. But we will very much focus on second semester students as well, because there they will definitely, because then it's 2023 already, they will definitely need the online learning agreement. But as for you, for me, it's also a bit of a question mark, working in international relations office, working in a higher education institution. What is the European Student Card Initiative? That's the umbrella initiative from the European Commission. It's one of the important focus areas for the European education areas as well. There are 4 flagships or 5. Now I'm not very well prepared, but there are 4 flagships. Thank you, Anikó. And it's one of them is the European Student Card Initiative. You can find more information. We will, of course, share the slides later with you. There's a link to the EDSSI knowledge base where you can find the policy context. And there was a high-level communication, I think, about towards the end of last year, where once again the European Student Card Initiative, like European University Alliances, were once again stressed as being of vital importance to realize this European education area towards 2025. So it's a very important priority from the European Commission, and Erasmus Without Paper is one of the initiatives that comes under this European Student Card Initiative. There were also some questions about European Student Card. It's out of scope, I would say, of EDSSI, at least EDSSI 1. But it's also one of the things that are part of the European Student Card Initiative, where basically the European Student Card is not about the card, it's about student identification. And I think Anikó already alluded to that, that the student can demonstrate its student status without needing a card, a real card, but in an online manner, he or she can identify him or herself as a student, and then can benefit from services in whatever country, maybe from higher education, but also outside of higher education, depending on, of course, those service providers, whether or not they want to provide services to students. For example, libraries, it could be very much opened towards the whole student community. EDSSI architecture project, I think Anikó in the beginning of the presentation addressed that question, so I leave it for there. And the same for the European Student Identifier. I cannot explain it better than Anikó did in one of her first introductory slides. So it's about authentication and mobility management. I can stress its importance from the Erasmus Without Paper perspective, especially when we have more and more processes digitized. Once we start sending information about the student, for example, in the nomination process, if you have ESI and then you receive a piece of information about learning agreement, ESI is there as well. You can very easily match the nomination and the learning agreement. And then we send a transcript of records to the sending university, we send this ESI, the European Student Identifier, and then once again, it's very easy for them to be sure that they connect the transcript of record with the right student. So it's very important for Erasmus Without Paper. The scope and issues with EWP, It's also your top question in Slido at the moment, where Karin indicates that, okay, beneficiary model, we are not responsible for that. We also experience the same problems indeed, but EWP and dashboard, it's under the responsibility of partly EDSSI, but also the Erasmus Without Paper Plus project, which is funding from the European Commission in order to also support higher education institutions to make this happen. And in the Erasmus Goes Digital webinar on the 16th of June, we presented an interoperability reinforcement plan that's supported by the European Commission, where in 6 months' time we will roll out some actions in order to try to improve this interoperability. And it's about opening the ESSI service desk, which is the whole support infrastructure established under EWP Plus. And by the way, under EDSSI, we started experimenting with this support infrastructure, and now it's taken to a higher level and much more funding in terms of staff members working on the ESSI support. So this is one of the elements we want to flag, and you can, whenever you have an interoperability issue, you can contact this service desk. But it's also about a relationship manager with third-party providers, where as a consortium we will have much more frequent contacts with those colleagues. It's also about better communication with IROs. We will organize town hall sessions, open sessions where you can ask your questions and we will address them in the best possible manner. So if you want to learn more about this interoperability reinforcement plan, you should check the Erasmus Goes Digital webinar that took place a few weeks ago. There were questions about what about EWP for traineeships and staff. Currently, it's not in scope of the activities that we are working on, but of course, this is indeed one of the next steps after what's currently in the roadmap, which is interinstitutional agreements, learning agreements, nominations, transit of records. Once all of that works properly, because that's really what we are focusing on right now, also with this interoperability reinforcement plan, make sure that it works. And then we can further digitize the processes that are in the pipeline, such as traineeships, staff mobility agreements, and all of that. What to do if partners are not ready? I think I already hinted towards that. Focus on those partners that are ready, because many of your partners are connected and you can already exchange a lot of data with them. And then the others will follow shortly, hopefully when the interoperability reinforcement plan comes into focus, and that we get the first results from that. But really, as many higher education institutions are connected via the dashboard, it should be possible to exchange learning agreements, interinstitutional agreements with your colleagues also using dashboard without any problem. So do not be scared away from rumors of things not working. Sometimes they don't work, but we also have the service desk in place. If something doesn't work, please contact them. They are quite effective. The last couple of weeks, I had a few tickets there, and I think they did a great job in supporting me with issues I had with interinstitutional agreements, also exchanging with dashboard. By the way, Ghent University had an in-house system. But this service desk is available via support.erasmus.paper.eu. Maybe we can also type it in the chat. There were some functionality specific systems. I mean, questions about functionality that was about specific systems like the dashboard. That's very difficult for us to answer here. But when you're using the dashboard, please make sure to go to cc.erasmus.paper.eu, which is the EDSSI knowledge base with a lot of articles and videos on how you should use and make the best out of the functionality in the EWP dashboards. A very important question about the connection to the beneficiary module. Unfortunately, it was actually part of the scope of the EDSSI activities, Unfortunately, we did not manage to connect to the beneficiary module. Of course, you also, and Karin already referred to it, there's issues with the beneficiary model, so they're very much focusing on first making it work, and hopefully it will come back on the agenda to connect higher education institution systems, EWP dashboard, to the beneficiary module in order to have automatic reporting. How to test EWP? There's a development environment that's very important, I think. Do not test in production. And it depends from your situation. When you're using the dashboard, you don't have access to development, but when you're using third-party system or an in-house system, you might be able to interact with partners via in this way. And there's also the registry, where you can find partners also present in dev. In Ghent University, for example, I have an account to test in the development environments. If we then look to the next group of questions, it's about guidance and support. I hope that we did answer the first question, how EWP works, in the presentation today. The EWP dashboard specific functionality, we provide you with a link to the knowledge base where you can find the articles and videos related to the EWP dashboard. General guidance and support is available via this knowledge base as well. You can see the link there, and via support.erasmus.paper.eu. How to improve communication and interaction with stakeholders. I would be able to spend about 1 hour on this question, but basically it is one of the tasks under the EWP Plus consortium, where Ghent University is also responsible for outreach and communication. We organize webinars. We have frequent meetings with national agencies, with the digital offices there, in order to coordinate the information streams and the communicative actions. In the cc.erasmus.paper.eu, you have a news section. If you go there, you can find it on the left. There's news, so you can find frequent updates on what's going on. We will organize this town hall session, I think still beginning of next month. There's also the general information on the competence center, on the knowledge base, and we're working on a governance structure where we have more direct lines in terms of governance with IRO, International Relations Offices. In the webinar on the interoperability reinforcement plan, we launched user groups. You can join those user groups. There's also an article about it on the knowledge base. So go to cc.erasmus.paper.eu to the news section, click on user groups, and there you can join with colleagues using the same system, exchange about the difficulties you experience, the solutions you have. And this will also become part of the official governance structure that is still being operationalized under the EWP Plus consortium. Some specific questions: can we use organization support for EWP implementation? I think organization support can indeed use for such activities. It's up to the university, to the higher education institution, to decide what exactly they want to fund with OS, organizational support. And this type of action, of course, is very much in line. Like if you can recruit someone who is specifically dealing with EWP for a big university, it won't be that easy for a smaller higher education institution, but you can indeed use this for the more organizational matters related to mobility. So EWP and the whole digitization agenda is certainly part of it. And then the last question is a little bit more tricky. Is the EWP dashboard available to larger higher education institutions? The answer basically is not really. At the moment, it is still somewhat available, but you should understand how the dashboard came into being. And it was a solution, like I stressed in my presentation, for small universities that did not have any solution to manage their mobilities. But it's also, in terms of functionality, not catering for very large numbers. So that's why, as a large university, I would rather not go there and try to find other solutions for managing mobility. It's not a clear cutoff, or it's not clearly described, but there's discussions with the European Commission as well underway on how to kind of guide the colleagues in the direction of other tools. And back to Anikó.
Thank you very much, Paul, for this. And I hope that many of the questions I think now are being answered. And I'm very glad that you are still with us. We know that this is like a little bit of a long training, but now a very exciting part comes. So please prepare your Slido, because now we are going to go through basically 12 questions and 12 answers, and we are going to build together a general flow of an Erasmus project. So like I said, we will reassess a little bit the key concepts from today and build up this mobility project flow through the questions. So there will be always one question where you will provide the answer. And based on the answer, we are going to formulate the main step in the flow of a general mobility project. So if you are with me, let's start and hit the first question. So let's get ready and join the quiz. And then let's see the first question. I think you will have like 30 or 45 seconds to answer. 45. What is necessary for your higher education institutions to be able to realize Erasmus mobility projects, an Erasmus charter, an international partnerships, international course catalog, service and capacity to host international students and staff, system that recognizes study or work from abroad, or all of the above? So tell us, what do you think, what is necessary for a higher education institution to be able to realize Erasmus mobility projects, you know, before you would even start to do it? And you will have 10 more seconds to think about it. And let's see. Very good. So actually, this was a very tricky question because there were no wrong answer. Actually, all of these things can be necessary, but you guessed very well that the most important is an Erasmus charter for higher education and international partnerships. So let's see. This is going to be the first block. So what we need for Erasmus program is an ECHE and some international partnerships for sure. Without this, for sure, you will not be able to start. So let's see the next question. How do you estimate how many mobilities you need to apply for per academic year? Based on the willingness of the management and the financial director, or based on the number in the IIA, applications from previous year, other factors that influences this motivation? Because of course, every year you have to apply for funds for the next academic year. So let's see, how do you decide on that? Very good. Some of you respect very much the willingness of the management and the financial director, and that is also important actually. So no wrong answer here as well. But basically what you have to be sure is that you checked the numbers in the institutional agreement, that you checked the application and the motivation from the previous year. So the second step is going to be to secure the fund, right? So you have the ECHE, you have the institutional agreements, but then every year you have to make sure that you have the fund to realize the Erasmus program. The third part is going to be something that is related to this question. So what I would like to ask you is to list here 2, 3, or 1 aspects of how you promote Erasmus Plus at your institution. So tell me about this. What do you do? Are you doing, I don't want to give any ideas. I want to see, I see many of you is typing. Sorry. And let's hit send. So you have a website, very good. You have information sessions, Facebook, Erasmus Days, events, guides, websites, events, publications, on Instagram. You are doing a lot of things. You are not only coordinators, you are also PR and communication experts, right? Exactly, very good. I think you can see all of the many answers. And I see that you're still, personally speaking, I very much second that. Encourage to trip, online meetings, personal promotion, information sessions, social media. Exactly, I still see you are typing, so I will leave you to finish. Visible office, exactly. And I will wait for all of you to have the chance to finalize. Meeting with students, information at Facebook, university website, open door for students, emails. Exactly. Welcome brochure for first semester students. Exactly. Already in the beginning, already by the time of recruitment, actually, you can tease the students to come to your university because they will have the opportunity to go abroad. Information in our database. Thank you very much. This we will save these answers, so we will be able to take stock of it. So the next step is to recruit and promote the program, correct, within your institution and among the students and even the staff. The next one is about decision. So what I'm curious about is actually how complex is the decision-making process that you are applying for granting Erasmus Plus scholarships. So, you know, how complex it is. How do you decide who will get Erasmus scholarship from the lot of applications? Are you cutting the numbers very much? Everybody is receiving the scholarship. You are having a very long procedure. Also, faculties, academic staff is taking part in the procedure. There is a decision-making board. So I'm asking about the complexity, and I see that the majority has a fairly complex system. This is my experience as well. That most of the universities are basically having a very complex system because, of course, the decision-making process is influenced by many factors. How many places are available at the most popular institutions, correct, and countries. So if you have only a few places at Spain, you have to have a very good system to be put to decide who can go to those popular destinations where you have 20 applications for one place, correct? So thank you very much. I see that from the participants, most of you are applying a rather complex system for decision making. And indeed, this is the next step. So after you recruited the students and they applied for your scholarship, somehow you have to select and decide who goes where. Get ready for the next question. What happens usually after you have the final list of students who have been granted with Erasmus Plus students? They can start and filling out and submitting the learning agreement, or you will nominate them, or they can like contact directly with the host institution. So what is happening after you inform them about the Erasmus grants that they wanted? Exactly. Exactly. So we once again, I wanted to emphasize the importance of the nomination step here. Actually, you have to somehow make aware the partner that who are you going to send to the university. So here we go. And Teresa was the fastest in this case. So congratulations. So let's nominate the students and let's see what is the next step. And here I'm turning back a little bit for the presentation of Paul. And I'd like to ask you to what learning agreements are not catering for. Is it to initiate learning agreement at receiving higher education institution, share updated versions by sending higher education institution, add comments when approving learning agreement, share first version of learning agreement approved by student and sending higher education institution, the list of courses that are available at the receiving higher education institution for recognition, or approve or reject comment by receiving higher education institution. So which is what the learning agreements in the EWP context are not catering for. You can select more here. And I will give you a little more time. And let's see. Exactly. So you cannot really comment when approving the learning agreement. Exactly the list of courses are not available at the receiving higher education institution in the learning agreement. Initiate learning agreement from receiving higher education institution point of view is not possible with this. Recognition should be possible. Share updated versions by sending higher education institutions, or approve or reject. Okay, once again, you did very well. Oh, I'm leaving because I see that you are still working. So Paul, I think you did a great job here delivering this message. And let's go for the next step. So this is why I was asking this, because the next step is exactly after nomination in a general workflow, you will start and manage the learning agreement and try to manage learning agreements with your students, however the procedure internally at the university. The next question is, how many of your partners ask that your students send another application after nomination? So I'm sure that this is your experience as well, that you nominated your student and then the partner institution is asking that your student sends another application for to be able to enroll and get accepted to that university. I see that most of the participants says that all of them are asking for this. So most of the participants says that all of them are asking for an extra nomination. What I would like to invite you to after the training is to really critically evaluate the importance of this, whether this is necessary or this could be done with a properly filled interinstitutional agreement where you indicate clearly the requirements of what type of students you would like to see at your institution. Okay, so the next step was to reapply if there is this step in the flow of the university, because in some cases it is possible that it's already done by the nomination and you do not have to resend extra information. So let's see the next step. When your students are receiving Erasmus scholarship, before the mobility starts, by the time of arrival to the host higher education institution, during their mobility, or after the mobility. And of course, I'm curious about, the average. Of course, there are always exceptions, but in general. So I see that it is, I think, from the student point of view, it is very good to see that most of the students at your institution received the scholarship before the mobility. I think it's really important, especially for inclusivity, because many of the students have no proper financial background to be able to start a mobility period, paying for the accommodation, the travel, and any extra costs that occur mainly, you know, in the beginning. There is always a larger cost, and then of course they can live the life of the Erasmus students from very small amount of money. But in the beginning, there are some things that they really have to pay for. Okay, it's really good to see this result here, actually. So the next one is managing the grant, correct? So we are very busy, especially already maybe, you know, in this period, to make sure that the students will receive their fund before they leave for mobility in August or September. The next one is, well, I'm curious about is, what kind of services or trainings do you offer for your outgoing students to prepare them for the mobility period? So this is once again an open text. So tell me if you are actually offering anything, and if you do, what do you do? So you see pre-departure meeting, other meetings, I see, okay. There is the OLS language test, exactly. Course of English language. So far, intercultural meetings, OLS, pre-departure meeting, cultural meetings, I see. Exactly. Zoom sessions, seminars, courses on cultural reflection and cultural shock, exactly. Explaining everything basically to them, what to expect. I assume also from the administrative and practical point of view. Exactly, exactly. So there is the other work that we are doing during the summer, and this is to confirm from Paul that there is never a silent period at the international office. There's always something to do. In the middle of the July, of course, we are going to do trainings for the students to prepare them for what is waiting for them during the mobility period. Thank you very much for all of these ideas. So the next step is to prepare administratively, physically, psychologically, practically, culturally, the students for what is waiting for them during the Erasmus period. And once they arrived and they are on their route, I'm curious, how do you track your students during the mobility? Are you tracking them? How do they contact you if there is any issue? Email, emails. So you are sending frequent emails, checking with the receiving institution. Randomly by email or phone. Constantly, email via Viber, Viber, WhatsApp, exactly. Certificate of arrival and certificate of departure. Designated contact person from the program. Exactly. So basically, during the mobility, they are in the hands of the receiving institution, right? But of course, we keep touch with the outgoing students via some email or reminders, you know, before the mobility ends, etc. And another question: how many of your students are changing their learning agreements during the mobility? Paul emphasized that changes in the learning agreement are rather the rule than the exceptions, if I remember correctly. And this is also my experience. So yeah, if you can estimate, exactly. Almost all of them. In your opinion here, I mean, 37% of you, basically the majority says that almost all of them is changing their learning agreements during the mobility. Exactly, 6.9 is this the current score. Thank you very much for sharing this. This is we also going to save this one because it's very good feedback for us to see these numbers here. Thank you. So here is the next step, right? During the mobility, we track the students and make sure that the changes in the learning agreement are done and the learning agreement is signed, correct? So let's see the next step. Which documents do you ask for closing the mobility of the students? I'm curious. And in case, you know, they did not receive the full amount of scholarship, I assume for the balance of the payment. Are you asking for the certificate of attendance? Are you asking for a signed learning agreement, a transcript of records, a signed learning agreement after with subjects recognized, a certificate of a report and recommendations, and under report, I'm sorry, I understood the participant report that is obligatory to be submitted after the mobility. Yeah, exactly. So let me take a look. Yeah, participants report and other reports and recommendations. So I see that basically all of them are in the same place because in my opinion and in my experience, these are the things that you have to ask from your students more or less. So the certificate of attendance is going to be super important to finalize the final amount of the scholarship. The transcript of record is an obligatory part and also going to be necessary for the recognition of the studies. The participant report is the requirement of the commission. The learning agreement is a contractual attachment of the grant agreement in many cases. So I think all of these documents are very, very important to close the mobility of the student. So thank you very much for confirming this. So we will end and recognize in the project. And here comes so far the last step. How do you support your students after the mobility? And here I'm also inviting you a little brainstorming. What do you do after? Actually, there are many studies that there is the so-called Erasmus Blue that hits the students a few weeks after they arrived back from the mobility period. Because of the lower pace and less challenging environment, they indeed a little become depressed and blue and don't feel that good like before. So I see that you are talking to them, asking for feedback, reverse culture shock exactly that hits them. I myself, I also remembered for this. To write a testimony about their experience, exactly, survey, questionnaire, Erasmus alumni meeting. Yeah, this is one of the things that I highly support, the importance of organizing alumni meetings. Involve them in the buddy system. That is the other one, I think one of the most important, because they know how it is to be on Erasmus. So when you are hosting Erasmus students, you can very much invite them, and they will do very much willingly because they would like to provide the same experience that they had abroad. Exactly. And I see nobody is typing, so I will close this step as well. So we will have a follow-up. And of course, we are also going to prepare the report. So if you see at the screen now, you see basically a general Erasmus project flow from the beginning when you are basically signing interinstitutional agreements and making sure that you are having an Erasmus charter and you comply with Erasmus charter regulations till the end, where you closed the mobility period and you are preparing for reporting. And here I wanted to show you which are the steps that are already a little bit digitalized within EWP. That's what you see in pink. And the first ECHA is a little bit blue because, of course, ECHA is digitalized via the system of the Commission. With gray, I indicated that these are also digital, but mostly in the commercial or in-house tools. So not yet in the freely available tools like the Erasmus dashboard or EWP dashboard or the online learning agreement. And the blue ones are the ones that are basically available via the European Commission. And I made a small remark here that Erasmus Plus app also provides many digital solutions for the management of the Erasmus project flow. So I highly encourage you to discover that as well. And I understand that this might seem a lot, but you are not alone. So here I collected a little bit of your list of allies that maybe you are not even aware of. In your own higher education institutions, there is the IT department. And for the future, because anyway it's going to be digital, I highly encourage you to build personal good relationships with the person that is doing IT or student data management in your university, because you will have to work with them and they will make your life much easier. Financial department, always very important for reporting purposes. Anyway, you can't avoid to work with them. The communication department can help you a lot with the PR and all of the promotional activities that you have to organize to promote the Erasmus within your institutions. The faculty and the schools should support you in your work. The academics that we often forget, but they are playing a key role. And there is the project called Teach with Erasmus, where you can also learn a lot about the role of academics in Erasmus mobility management, and they can help you a lot if they say 2 words about the importance of Erasmus in the beginning of their class. It makes much more motivation in the student than whatever the Erasmus coordinator says during the promotional periods. And you have ESN, which is the Erasmus Student Network, which basically operates in all of the countries and in most of the universities. And you have SSPs, student service providers, that now in the EDSSI project we are bringing into the Erasmus Without Paper environment. And if you maybe attended into the previous training that you can also watch online later on, there we are going to talk about the role of student service providers in Erasmus+. On national level, you have the national agency. Their job is to support you. I know it is not maybe the everyday experience, but their job is to support you. So you can ask questions from them and they should support you. There are different national level organizations, informal groups, community on Facebook or on LinkedIn that can support you also on national level in doing Erasmus coordination. And on EU level, associations such as the European University Foundation can support you. The EWP Network is preparing many tools and trainings for you, such as this one is in collaboration with the EWP Network to inform you about the latest developments. And there is the community like the EWP Network team or group in LinkedIn where you can join and hear about the latest improvements. So you are absolutely not alone. Look, there are a lot of boxes on this screen to work with you, and I highly encourage you to build up your network, because then your work is going to be much easier in your everyday life. So here we conclude after almost 2 hours. I hope that we managed to answer most of your questions, but if there are still questions, we are very happy. We have actually 30 minutes more from the Zoom meeting, so we are very happy to receive your questions here. And perhaps, the ones that are on the top, I would propose, Paul, that we try and address them. And I will start with one of the most upvoted questions: when do we need to implement the ESI? A very good question. And there is no strict deadline. However, I think now you appreciate all of the steps whenever we were mentioning ESI, how important is the role that ESI is playing into these processes. So this is basically in your interest to do it as soon as possible. And you have to do two things. You have to figure out at your institution who is doing student identification. Is it your IT department usually, or the department that is handling the electronic student system where the students are, applying for the classes and where the students are enrolling? If you have that person who is doing identification and authentication, you just have to send them all of the information that you can find on the EDSSI.eu website about ESI, and they will understand what they have to do, and then they will just do it. It is the case of 90% of the European universities today in Europe. It is basically whatever I've seen, it took 3-4 days to do. And you don't really have to do anything. You just have to, connect the dots. Basically, you are liaising and make sure that the right person knows about it, that they have to do it. Because the problem is that they don't know it. So you have to tell them. There is no strict deadline, but basically as soon as possible. Paul, do you want to take maybe the first one?
I think I already alluded several times to this question in my responses. So I think it's already answered the third one as well. So the roadmap as it stands by end of 2022, we need to be connected for end-to-end institutional agreements and learning agreements in 2023, whatever it means for transcript of records and nominations. But I don't have more to share about that, apart from Commission says that it's about your efforts in order to join this digitization movement, and that you should not wait in order to get connected.
Exactly. And roadmap, I think we discussed thoroughly. Maximum number of mobilities for the EWP dashboard. Yes, you heard well. It means for smaller higher education institutions. If I have to say a number, I would say 100, but Paul, you can come in as well.
It's what I was referring to before, that we're trying to define what exactly is a large or a medium-sized university. Probably experience will tell as well. If you have a lot of students, it won't be very effective to manage them via the EWP dashboard. So very difficult to say indeed an exact number. But you rightly say, Anikó, that it's more about 100 than about 1,000, definitely.
Exactly. What is exactly and legally EWP approval? What has to be presented in case of an Erasmus audit? How is it materialized on a signed interinstitutional agreement and all? It's a complex question, good question.
I can try to answer that one, Anikó, and it's indeed a very pertinent and important question, I would say. And we see that many colleagues, for example, using dashboards, request a functionality to export the agreement in a PDF. It's functionality that's not present currently in the Erasmus, the EWP dashboard, but it's one of the things that are in the pipeline. Many things are in the pipeline, but it's a matter of prioritizing, of course. But basically, what those colleagues have in terms of proof is the technical messaging from EWP, and that's, for example, in our in-house system, we keep it's an XML. It's not human readable, I would say, unless you have IT background skills. But we just keep it, and that's the proof. The message that we received from the partner, hey, saying like this, EEA, we approve it, a technical message based on the EWP communication protocols, that's the exact proof. And whether an auditor will understand that, we'll see in the future, but it's definitely the legal basis. And like I said, in dashboard and other systems as well, you will probably have some kind of more human readable extract of the agreement in PDF, where, like, for example, the timing of the approval messages can be added to the signature box. But technically speaking, this is part of the implementation at each of the nodes.
So this is basically for technical level people, and to bring together this with the audit, we will see, because perhaps it was not really clarified also from the auditor point of view yet, as it never had happened or occurred so far. So this is a little bit of the uncharted territory. But I think Paul just really provided a feedback on it. And if there is more question, feel free to ask for more clarification later on. The IIA renewal through EWP takes more time than ever. So this is, I think, also Paul already addressed, to try and work with someone that has a system that works already. But Paul,
but I would also like to comment on the help desk that seemed to be unavailable. To be honest, the ST support desk, the new help desk infrastructure that was established somewhere in April, they have a service level agreement, and if I'm not mistaken, they should answer in 5 days. And they are, I think, at 98% on this server level agreement. It's a bit technical, but I would be surprised if this concerns the current support infrastructure, because there it's really monitored very well. And in my experience from the last couple of weeks, where I also created tickets for the support desk, I did receive the answer in 2 or 3 days, which is, I think, a fair amount of time.
I fully agree with that. And I'm sure Paul is also aware of the fact that I was part of the team that set it up, the new help desk. And I was also working as one of the agents there for a while. And I can assure you that it is no way that you are not answering a question in that system. So now, the system that is working since April, it is a system which is based on, commercial from the private market software that makes sure that you have to provide as an agent an answer within a certain amount of time, and you have to make sure that the answer, is something that makes sense to the user and the client. And I would say that the colleagues that are currently working there are doing a fine job in trying to tackle all of the different questions, from the students and from the staff. So I hope that your experience in a few months will change and apply to this new rhythm. And feel free to actually now ask questions there, because you should be able to receive the feedback. And so 2 or 3 more questions, I think, that are voted with 2 or more participants. So before connecting to My Academy ID proxy, we need to have in place a data processing agreement. Which data besides the ESI will be deployed in My Academic ID? Nothing else. So it's only the name and the email of the student. Is ESI mandatory for OLA via EWP? Well, it is not mandatory on the paper, right? But how else would another partner identify the student if there is no unique identifier? So this is why it is basically an important element. It's like, is it important to add yeast to the dough of the bread? Well, you can do a bread without yeast, but then it's going to be flat. It's somehow similar with the ESI. I hope I answered the question. Okay, and this one as well. So what are the ramifications of not connecting in time to the EWP network before the end of December?
That's a very good question indeed. It's been announced that it will become part of the EDSSI monitoring guidelines. So each national agency is responsible for monitoring how the Erasmus projects are implemented in the universities. And they have audits for that. Every now and then universities get an audit. And as part of this audit, they will also look into this whole EWP connection thing. Whether or not you will lose an EDSSI immediately, most of the time when something is not right in the audit report, you get some kind of improvement track, and so it takes some time. But definitely it will become part of the audit trail. And for example, in Ghent, we have an audit on the 2020 project or call now this summer. So we know what to do once again, even in theory, less busy time period. We get an audit, not on EWP yet, but it can happen, and it's the second one in the period that I'm working for the university. So it takes place every 3 or 4 or 5 years, depends a little bit on the country as well.
Thank you, Paul. When we will get more information about the registration platform and assigning the new EWP contact person, I remember in some webinar this was mentioned. Indeed, this was mentioned in the EDSSI. You can rewatch actually the video recording about the conference where this was briefly explained. And now we are working actually on the finalization of the platform, so making sure that it operates smoothly. This is part of the EDSSI project. And the assigning of the EWP contact person, I think that is going to happen sometimes around the autumn semester. There is no strict deadline yet. This EWP admin person, you remember very well, the EWP admin person will have to be allocated by each institution, and this is going to be the person that is going to be basically oversee the connection of the university to the EWP system. So it basically have to be a person that knows Erasmus program, but also have a little IT background. Which is the stronger part? It's either or, that one is still okay. Implementing ESI seems easy, but we are facing many problems how to implement it, and many questions regarding GDPR and from technical point of view are raised. If there are questions about ESI, feel free to contact the EDSSI project, the contact page, or the My Academic ID help desk directly. And we will be able to answer your specific questions. I do not see issues with the GDPR since it's EduGain compatible, which is a worldwide system. Technical point of view, that can be always answered with the national research and educational network of the particular country. But these questions, even if you send it to me, I'm happy to clarify further, or the ESCI help desk can also address these questions, the My Academic ID help desk directly, or you can also send the specific questions to the EDSSI website. Paul, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to add that I posted a link in the chat towards those nice articles about demystifying the European Student Identifier, which could be inspiring if you struggle with implementing ESI. And I think, Anikó, that there's also another one coming up for the one of the coming weeks.
Yes, from Lund University, exactly, from Sweden. So Petri, I hope this answered your question. And some of the last questions, I think we're going to be able to kill all of them. Is there a system in place similar to OLA, but specifically for mobility agreements? You mean the grant agreement? Mm-hmm.
I guess that's indeed what Anna wants to ask. And first of all, it depends from your system. For example, in our own in-house system, we can of course develop whatever we like, and we have an kind of an online grant agreement system, which is quite useful because we do not need all those contracts anymore. It's all in a digital manner. Is this on the radar when it comes to the dashboard? At the moment, there's other priorities, but of course, the more we continue building the EWP dashboard, it could become part of the whole ecosystem as well. And third-party systems probably also have some functionality to manage those grants online. And when the question more is concerned about the Erasmus Plus traineeship agreements or staff mobility agreements, That is, the system is not in place, but it's also in the long-term planning. More details to be announced also in consultation with higher education institutions when the roadmap of the digitization of the Erasmus mobilities is further developed.
I hope this answered the question for me, for sure. It is very, I can relate that this is very difficult to deal with the grant agreements when they are on paper. I did that, and it's very difficult and challenging. I agree with that. Is the EWP system ready for vocational and educational training institution? This is a good question. I'm not sure that there will be. No, I leave it to you, Paul.
It's not in scope of the current activities, but the Erasmus Without Paper Plus consortium is funded via a tender. So that's structural funding from the Commission. And in this tender request, or how I should describe it, what they requested there is indeed also to expand this digitization to other sectors, but it's currently not in scope of the work program. Difficult to say when it will ever be, but it's definitely part of the whole agenda at the European Commission when they are speaking about the digitization of the Erasmus administration.
Exactly. How relevant or different is all of that for practice mobilities? I assume it's like training mobilities, or our institution only participates in internship mobilities. Well, that offers a little bit more flexibility for you, correct? And less regulations like with the study mobility. So far, if I understand correctly, the systems are not applicable for traineeship mobilities. That is for a next step, correct, Paul?
Yeah, and what I would also like to stress there is, like I explained before, Erasmus Without Paper, what we try to achieve is connecting systems. But it's difficult to say exact numbers, but we did some research under the framework of EWP Plus, and we had about 700 participants, and 70% of those participants indicated that traineeships take place outside of higher education. So this means that the solutions we came up with for supporting such processes should be different than peer-to-peer communication, as is the case with higher education to higher education institution. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the things future-oriented probably, but we need to see when it comes into focus.
Very important question got upvoted here. What should we do if our third-party company does not get to connect to EWP?
Yeah, that's
look at your Erasmus charter requirements.
It's probably not the right third-party company then, because they have some interest, if they don't want to lose clients who participate in the Erasmus program, to connect to EWP. Of course, some of them have delays. That's also clear. Maybe I can post in the chat also the link with the current third-party providers who are in contact with EWP or already have signed some kind of agreement that they are implementing the functionalities. But if it's totally not the case, I think you need to find other solutions, because in the end you are accountable for making sure that you will connect to EWP.
Exactly, or like combine. I mean, you don't have to entirely, leave the current company that you are working with, and hopefully you are having a good relationship with them, I assume, and you are satisfied with their service. So you can just basically transform some of the functionalities to a tool that is able to communicate with EWP. Otherwise, you are basically, segregated from the other institutions, and you are not in the workflow, you are not in the flow or bloodstream of the European Erasmus program. If the dashboard is not able to manage large amount of mobilities, how can we use it for various semesters and years? You can use it for semesters and years. It's the large amount of the mobilities per year or per semester, to clarify, but it's a good question, because we have to, in this case, emphasize. So this is not the overall number of the mobilities that you are implementing during the 7 year. it is how many mobilities you are implementing in one batch, so in 1 year or in one semester. Is there a transcript of records functionality for the OLAs in the dashboard?
Currently, that's not the case, but given the timeline, such functionality will become available as we move along towards the mandatory usage of transcript of records for higher education institutions. So you should be assured that the dashboard will follow, the functionality in the dashboard will follow the roadmap as set out by the European Commission. So if it's not the case right now, it will be made available in the future for sure.
Is it possible to say when I create agreement in dashboard as a draft? To say that is safe when you create an agreement in a dashboard as a draft?
I can also take that question, Anikó, because it was quite oftenly also requested at the Erasmus Goes Digital webinar on the 16th of June. And it's currently, this functionality is not available, but as many colleagues requested such functionality also in the help desk, this is the things that are taken into account when improving the dashboard functionality and interface. So it's not the case right now, but it will become available in the future. The same with filtering agreements. There's also a lot of questions about that, or for example, Erasmus codes are not sorted well, or that filters are missing. And all this kind of things is taken into account for new versions of the EWP dashboard and the functionalities that you use there. So it's definitely one of the things that colleagues are working on.
Mm-hmm. And then I think the next one goes to you as well. How I can create agreement and send to other side, but not to sign for the rector, because if I make change, the agreement I sign as a vice rector. So I think it's the issue with that the coordinator cannot sign. So they want to make changes before they send it to the rector to final signature.
Yeah, to be honest, that's also a question that's difficult to answer for me. The same for the next one. My advice would be to contact the support.erasmus.paper.eu help desk, and they can guide you to the articles in the knowledge base, or directly answer your question how to move forward.
But in general, if I understand correctly, so first you have to have a final concept that you negotiated with your partner, and then create one IIA in the system, and then ask for the signature from the rector for that, because that you already negotiated, so you don't have to change it anymore. So the same was answered by Paul. And last two questions. What is the course catalog API for?
First of all, the courses API and EWP, it's already available, but it's not a stable version. So it's not yet. It's not yet. I would not yet recommend to implement this API, because we are still behind the scenes working on improving the API itself. But in the end, you should be able, by using such functionality or such API, you should be able to directly connect your online learning agreement module towards the catalog, the course catalog of the partner university. And their students can directly choose courses. This, of course, is not the case right now, but it's a future-oriented approach or process, where your students can directly pick and choose the courses from the course catalog from the partner university. And then, of course, this kind of interoperability issues with a course that's typos, errors in number of credits, that would, of course, all be erased, because you directly connect to the course catalogs from the partner. But at the moment, like I said, it's not yet stable, and it's not the highest priority. But as already mentioned several times, this is a step-by-step building upon the other processes, and we definitely see some added value in a functioning course catalog API.
Excellent. And last question, which is the answer actually, once again, yes. So am I right to assume that OLA is only for smaller higher education institutions? Yes. What smaller means is actually being clarified. But our educated guess with Paul is the number of mobilities per semester is around 100. So this is our answer. And I see that basically we managed to clear the question board 2 minutes before the very end of this training. And I see the core team is still here. So I congratulate greatly to you all for being here. The last questions that I prepared here, actually, I'm going to add to the follow-up form, and you will be able to answer. And with this, in the last minute, I very much thank you for your attention and being with us during this entire training. I think and I hope that you learned something new and you got answers to many of your questions. The materials and the entire recording of the video is going to be uploaded to the EDSSI.eu per support page, and of course will be sent to you via email. And to be completely honest, I highly appreciate you being with us here and sending all of the questions. And this is what I encourage to do for you for the next years and periods, to make sure that that you ask your question, find your network, look around you. You are not completely alone, and we are really here to support you in this work that we feel very important to support for this very important period for the student's life that is going to change their entire career and life for the future. So it's a very good thing to contribute for. Paul?
What else can I add, Anikó? Thanks a lot to all participants. Thanks to you, Anikó, for all the hard work in the preparatory phase. And let's keep in touch. Keep an eye on the EWP Competence Center or EDSSI Knowledge Base, however you will call it. There's a new section where we frequently update users, and there's also a LinkedIn group on EWP, a lot of channels to be followed up on in order to receive early and direct updates. Thanks a lot. Have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.